Good morning, Year 4. I hope you're all okay. Today in English, we're going to be looking at some more narrative poems, and today we're really going to be focusing on that language used and the structure of the poem and understanding how that contributes to the meaning of the poem and how that makes the reader feel. So I've got this poem here. It's only part of a poem. I'm going to read you the first 3 parts of it. I want you to think of 2 questions. The first question being, who do you think the woman is? And the second question being, what do you think is unusual about this woman? So I'm going to read you the first part, so make sure you're listening. Miller's End. When we moved to Miller's End, every afternoon at 4, a thin shadow of shade quavered through the garden door. That means like crept, trembled. Dressed in black from top to toe and a veil about her head. To us all it seemed as though she came from the walking dead. With a basket on her arm, through the hedge gap she would pass, never a mark that we could spy on the flagstones or the grass. Now the flagstones are some stones. So I want you to think, who is this woman and what is unusual about her? Pause the video and have a think, please. Okay, so you might have used some specific language to help you understand who the woman might be. You might have thought, oh, she is a thin shadow of shade. If she's a shadow, is she a real person? Is she a ghost? If she is dressed in black from top to toe, you might think she might be going to a funeral. She might then start to think that she might be a widow, someone whose husband might have just died. She's got a veil on her head. A veil is, you'll see in a picture in a minute, it's a long kind of cloak coming from their head, and people who go to a wedding, the bride usually wears a veil. Why has she got a veil on her head though? She came from the walking dead, she came walking from the dead. Is she a ghost then? That makes me think she might be a ghost. With a basket on her arm. What has she got in that basket? So you might have been thinking there's some unusual things about her as well. Here it says, through the hedge gap she would pass. If she's looking through a hedge gap, and she's walking through a hedge gap, why is she walking that way? That's quite strange. Why didn't she walk the whole way around the park? What I want you to do now is spend the next 3 or 4 minutes, based on what we know about this woman, draw a rough outline of what you think she looks like on a piece of paper, please. So pause the video here and do that now for me, please. Okay, so you know how awful I am at drawing. I'm sure you're missing my drawings very much. So I haven't attempted to draw, but what I have attempted to do is get a picture as close to what I think this woman looks like as possible. So we can see here we've got the black head to toe outfit here. We've also got a veil on her head, so you can see it's like a long drape of material coming down from her head. We haven't got a basket on her arm, but you might have drawn a basket on her arm too. So now we have a rough idea of what this woman looks like. So we're going to read on the poem now. When I am reading the rest of the poem, I want you to think about what you like or what you don't like about the poem. What is your favourite line? Do you notice any patterns? And, most importantly, do you have any questions? So I'm going to read on now. I will be stopping at points to explain it to you because some of the language is a bit complicated and doesn't directly tell you what's going on. So I'm going to keep stopping to confer with you and let you know what has happened so far. So, when we told the garden boy how we saw the phantom glide, with a grin his face was bright as the pool he stood beside. So that stanza there, the family has spoken to a garden boy. Now, we don't know who this garden boy is yet, about how they saw the phantom glide. That basically means a phantom is like a ghost, and glide is like walking, travelling somewhere. So how the family saw the ghost moving between these hedge gaps. With a grin his face was bright, so he was grinning, he was smiling. He might have known this woman. As bright as the pool he stood beside. This pool might be an important aspect of this poem. Why was this garden boy stood by a pool? Anyway, let's read on. That's no ghost walk, Billy said, nor a ghost you fear to stop. Only old Miss Wickerby on a shortcut to the shop. So we now know that this garden boy is called Billy, and he's saying it's not a ghost, don't worry. It's not a ghost that you should fear either. You shouldn't be scared of this ghost. It's only a lady, an old lady called Miss Wickerby. And what she does, she takes her shortcut to the shop on her way through the hedge gap. So they're saying to the family, there's nothing for you to be worried about. So next day we lay in wait, they waited, past the civil time of day. Said how pleased we were, she came daily down our garden way. So this family now are thinking about what the garden boy, Billy, has said about how this woman must really enjoy passing this hedge gap. There's nothing to worry about. They waited for her. Suddenly her cheek it paled, turned as quick from ice to flame. Tell me, said Miss Wickerby, who spoke of me and my name? So Miss Wickerby has now, her cheek it paled, her colour from her cheeks had gone, she was pale, so she turned from ice to flame. Emotion-wise, what do you think it means when someone is turning from ice to flame? Maybe. Flame could mean that she might be angry for some reason. Now Miss Wickerby is demanding who has told that family that is her name. So, the family replied, Bill, the garden boy. She sighed, so Miss Wickerby knew that it was Bill, the garden boy. She said, of course, you could not know how he drowned, that very pool, a frozen winter long ago. So Miss Wickerby, has now mentioned that there was a pool that this Bill, the garden boy, had drowned in a long time ago. But look here, is that the pool he was stood beside here? Does that mean that Billy was a ghost too? There might be lots and lots of questions that you had. So pause the video now and have a think about these 4 questions on the slide, please. Off you go, Year 4. Okay, so you might have thought that you liked quite a lot, and maybe you disliked quite a lot about this poem. You might have liked the fact that it is quite filling you with suspense. You never know what's going to happen. Each time we start a new stanza, the kind of thoughts and feelings of these characters change. The plot of the story is twisted again. But you might not like the fact that it's quite hard to understand the moral behind the story, the actual plot behind the story. There's lots of questions you might have about Billy. Is he real? Who is Miss Wickerby? Is that her real name? Pattern-wise, there might be a few patterns that you've noticed too in regards to the stanza, the syllabic pattern. We are going to be looking at that more in detail in a moment. To start with, please, your very first task for English today is to have a go at drawing up your own secret strings for the poem Miller's End. You can see on the left hand of my screen here that I have included the secret strings from our poem Maggie and the Dinosaur, about where Maggie went into a museum and she found a dinosaur and took him out. And I've also included this in your resource pack. So now, could you please pause the video, go into your resource pack, find Miller's End poem, and start annotating it according to what you can see. You might be able to see lots of rhythm, rhyme. You might be able to look at the syllabic pattern, the syllables that are being used on each line. You might be looking at if there's any alliteration, if there's any opposites or phrases or words that really give you an image in your head of what's going on. I've also included the secret strings of Maggie and the Dinosaur in your resource pack too, as well as what you need to include when you're annotating your secret strings. So it's all there for you. Have a look on your resource pack, pause the video and make a note of the annotations that you can see on Miller's End, please. Off you go. Okay, so I'm going to have a look at those in when I'm marking your work, so I'm sure they are absolutely fantastic. Our final task of the day is really to look at this language and structure and actually to really think about how it's effective to the reader. So I've got my secret strings here for Maggie and the Dinosaur, and I've got 3 subheadings that I am going to be looking at and answering questions to. So my first subheading is all about language. This language can include whether or not the poem has rhyme, opposite words, alliteration or dialogue, which are all things that you should have noted in your recent annotation of our poem today. And my sentence goes like this: the poem has used language such as, and this is where you choose one of your features, so rhyme, opposite words, alliteration or dialogue. So just choose one. An example of where this poet has where this is used is where the poet wrote. So if you chose rhyme, you might want to then choose your rhyming words: saw, galore, dinosaur. This is effective as. You might want to write how that makes the reader feel. Does it make you understand a bit more about the poem? What does it give to the poem? Does it give a bit more of a rhythm, for example? Then have a look at the structure, look at the stanzas, the syllabic pattern, any repetition of words used. and then choose one part of that structure to write about. The poet uses structure in this poem. They have used maybe stanzas. An example of this is where they've used a stanza of 4 lines, for example. This is effective as, why is it effective? And finally, imagery. Which words give an image in your head and why? And you can pick word phrases too. The poet uses specific words such as, so you might choose 3 words that really make you visualize what the poem is going to be about, and then to state how do they give you an image in your head. Pause the video and don't write anything down, just have a think of anything you can include for this poem here, Maggie and the Dinosaur. That's why I don't want you to write anything, just think in your head and pause the video please. Off you go. Okay, let's have a look at what I have wrote then. So, for number 1, language and words. I have chosen to focus on opposite words. So, the poet has used language such as opposite words. An example of this is where the poet wrote, Maggie ran madly and Maggie just froze. So I've taken that from my secret strings. And I've said this is effective because it communicates to the reader how Maggie's actions and emotions have changed. They are now opposite throughout the poem, which is a result of her seeing the dinosaur. So I've communicated how the poet has used these opposite words and how this is effective. My structure, I have chosen to write about a syllabic pattern. I have chosen to look at the second stanza, and I have said an example of this is in the second stanza, 8-7-8-7. This is a syllabic pattern that I have noticed. I've said this is effective as it gives the poem more of a rhythm when it's being read. It also helps to enhance the ideas and the emotions of that stanza, emphasising how the dinosaur is feeling because nobody wants to play. So it helps the reader to read it in a better bit of rhythm, emphasising those important bits of that stanza. Finally, for imagery, I have chosen to think about 2 expanded noun phrases and 1 verb. So I've said that the poet uses specific words and phrases such as a dusty whisper, which I can see here in pink, earth-shattering roar, and stretching. And I've said about how each of these words and phrases make me have an image of my head and what that makes me feel. I've said these words give me an image in my head of someone speaking in a croaky, soft voice if they have a dusty whisper. I then said if someone speaks in an earth-shattering roar, it gives me an image in my head of someone shouting very loudly, quite impolitely or rude. I finally said that the verb stretching, that doing word stretching, gives an image in my head of a dinosaur with a large neck. I've put it in a context, stretching up to the ceiling. Okay, so the dinosaur must have a really long neck to be able to do that. Your task for today, you are going to have this exact worksheet. You would have already completed your secret strings for Miller's End, but I don't want to complete it for you because I want you to have a go. Then I would like you to complete the language section. You will have to choose 2 bits of language that you want to start writing about. Don't forget to write about it, give an example of where this is in the poem, and say how it's effective to the reader. That will be done twice. Same with structure, I only showed you 1 example, but you will be doing 2 examples again. So you've got your first example here and your second example. And finally with imagery, you are just choosing 3 words or phrases to use and to talk about the image that they give you in your head. So when you read the word, it could be, for example, paled. You could think of this word and just automatically have this image in your head of someone who is really discoloured and pale, looking quite ill. You could almost think about this word here, hedge gap. That would give you an image of maybe a green hedge and maybe a pierced gap through it, that someone can look through it. It's really, really things like that. Think about how the words make you think and make you feel. Okay? That is your task for today, Year 4. So you've got your 2 tasks. It's all in your resource pack for you and ready for you to start completing now. Off you go and have a lovely rest of the day, and I will see you in our next lesson. Bye, Year 4.